Welcome back to the Digital Accessibility Podcast. If you're looking to learn more about the field of accessibility, how to implement it within your role or your company, or to get advice on where to start or see how others have navigated complex issues that you may find along the way, then you're in the right place. I'm honoured to be able to share these insightful chats with thought leaders, advocates and practitioners of digital accessibility throughout this podcast, and I hope you'll find it a useful resource. As always, thank you so much for listening, and I hope you enjoy the chat. Today, I'm excited to welcome Zoe Portlock, the accessibility lead at Hargreaves Lansdown. With a strong background in user-centered design and a passion for digital inclusion, Zoe has been instrumental to embedding accessibility within HL's design and research processes. She's spoken at industry events like AXCON and is an active member of the accessibility community, championing inclusive digital experiences. So welcome to the podcast, Zoe. It's great to have you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. It's a real honor to join the lineup that you've had on here.
Oh, I just feel privileged. I'm starstruck every week, to be honest, or every month. But really appreciate your time. And yeah, I guess so. Jumping straight in, as always, really like to find out sort of background, your sort of intro into accessibility. Just a quick overview, because I know my intro might not have been all-encompassing.
Yeah, sure. So, hi, I'm Zoe, accessibility lead at Hargreaves Lansdown. Been doing this for over 6 years. Absolutely love it. Disabled myself and very much bring that experience in day to day, mixture of chronic illness, physical disabilities, and neurodiversity. And yeah, feel really lucky to be part of this community and industry. And always happy to talk about what we've been doing at HL.
Amazing, thank you. And yeah, so I guess your work with embedding digital accessibility at HL, Hargreaves Lansdown, you've played a really key role in driving accessibility forward within the organisation. So I know that a lot of people may have already heard some talks and things on how you've done this, but could you share like key steps and strategies that you've used to make accessibility like a standard part of HL's processes, their products and their services?
Yeah, absolutely. I have quite a few things to say on this. So I really feel like disabled voices should be at the root of our efforts. So very much believe in the nothing for us without us mantra. So for me, like every accessibility journey has to start with buy-in, and whether that is from the teams around you or whether that is with leadership, what really helped me was securing and sharing those client stories, real clients. So they can just be untouchably impactful. It just means giving visibility. It means that you're putting a face to that, 1 in 4 people have a disability in the UK statistic. And especially when the service, in my case, is linked to people's savings and to their pensions, it's so important to have a human voice and face behind that. So
Yeah.
to help me capture those client stories so that I can really thank people for reaching out, because I do feel like we don't if you have been wronged or you have been blocked for completing a process as a disabled person, that company doesn't you don't owe them more of your time to tell them the details of it. So when people do reach out, I just want to say like thank you. I listen, I will act on this, and build those into relationships. So I have like a client facing accessibility inbox for this, and that's just been such a good foundation to be able to give real client cases. But generally, the start of my approach was very grassroots, just to build up some interest on the ground, but then securing an exec sponsor. So if that's not necessarily just for budget, but also for momentum and for representation in the rooms where it happens and where it matters. So like, for example, through my executive sponsor, we've been able to embed different accessibility capability requirements at each level of an engineering career development framework. So things like that, or being pulled into really big procurement contracts to make sure that this new system that they want to do all of the HR processes on is actually usable by disabled colleagues.
Mm.
So if it's not even needs to be about budget, even it's just someone advocating for you in those rooms. Um, But really, it started side of desk, and I just have this big passion and interest in how the different ways that humans can interact with digital technology in a way that meets their needs, and that is just incontainable. I find it so fascinating and cool. So, um, very early days, I put together these presentations with demonstrations of different assistive technology using our real website as the material. I remember one thing, the very first thing that I do, just to kind of hook people's attention, is explain about skip to main content links and how important they are, and have colleagues guess that if it wasn't there, how many times would someone have to press tab to get through the mega nav to the content.
Yeah.
It was 156 times back then. So
Oh my word.
absolutely brutal. That
Who has the time?
I know. That is why that skip to main content link is in place. But it just opens eyes, and I find that the same with color contrast. Once you tell people, they can't unsee it. But
Yeah.
that mega menu is now down to 16 tabs for the whole thing. So happy to say. But
Wow.
really like eye-opening stuff that's going to change people's views and open it up, that view of accessibility on a day-to-day scale as well. Um, but really, I'd run that session with different disciplines, different product squads, frankly, anyone that would listen to me. I'm autistic, and I think that accessibility is a special interest of mine, and it's why I have so much energy for this role, this industry, and this topic. And that energy that I can give to it has seemed to have been pretty infectious. So that's been good. But
Amazing.
we built a community, so created a working group and an ambassador program, bringing together motivated colleagues across the business to work together in a way that improves our accessibility, and really feel like we're making a difference for people. And those two initiatives are still running almost 5 years on now. We're still touching new ground and reaching new areas of the business. Um, and in more recent times, when Hargreaves Lansdown have built their design system, I've been able to be part of that to relook at all the branding and make sure that the way we use our colors is accessible and discourage color combinations that are not reliably readable. We even changed the brand font because it wasn't very accessible. I actually had some feedback come in. Someone said, "Oh, you're a financial services company. You earn enough money to not be printing your letters in grey ink." And it's not
Mm.
that we were printing in grey ink, it was that the font was so thin that it always looked grey.
Wow.
So we've been able to influence those kinds of things. And we also have compulsory e-learning for every single colleague so that they can learn the content basics for accessibility and how to use the brand accessibly and communicate with each other in accessible ways. That's been a really big initiative that has had a really big impact. Over 2,500 people completed that. Um,
Oh,
so
wow.
it not a small piece of work, but also a good amount of impact.
Yeah.
Um, and now I'm mostly focused on supporting and enabling product squads and formalizing discipline-specific standards. And rather than working on awareness anymore, I like to think we're past that step, and now it's about giving people what they need to share the responsibility of accessibility and really own it as part of their job roles.
Mm.
But that is a 6-year journey in probably just a few minutes
Yeah.
with those highlights. Yeah, it's been really amazing,
That's
honestly.
incredible. And that's the thing. I mean, um, so many touch points. And then even when you mentioned the font, it's funny because my wife gets letters quite consistently from Hargreaves Lansdown for her workplace pension. And she's like, "Oh my God, all these letters." But I hadn't noticed. I actually thought it was grey ink as well, and it was something I was going to bring up off call. But I'm glad you brought it up. But that's really interesting as well that it's literally the font size or the how bold it
So
is or
thin.
how thin it is.
Hmm.
That can change something. And I guess that kind of also touches on the crossover when it's how much impact you can have on a from a digital perspective, but then that's hard print as well, like the graphic design side of things as
Yeah.
well. So that's really interesting. But you've obviously done so much, which is awesome.
It takes years to change a font in every place ever. It was a fantastic piece of work. We did a lot of focus groups with disabled people, um, and used a lot of client feedback over the years, for a really good result.
Yeah, brilliant. I think as well, is it the font in your branding as well, the actual name Hargreaves Lansdown and how that appears? Had that branding been changed? Um,
There's been rebrands as such over the years, but it's more our main body font that's in all the
yeah,
letters and all the website and
brilliant.
every touch point ever. It's
And
taken
that's
us many years.
it's bringing it to the fore, I suppose, isn't it? Like those incremental changes, but it's so apparent, if there's such a huge change and it's everywhere, that must feel like such a huge achievement. So yeah, awesome work. Um, awesome. So the second question that was sent over was about your the accessibility research and your AxCon panel, or the talk, sorry, that you gave at AxCon,
Mhm.
about creating an in-house research panel comprising of Hargreaves Lansdown clients, which you touched on just then as well, clients with accessibility needs. Since then, I believe it's evolved a bit, and the accessibility research is really embedded within the main sort of research function. So I know you've already done a talk on it, and things might have changed. But if could you sort of talk about that, like if there's been any transition and any challenges?
Yeah, absolutely. So I presented something I was really proud of, AxCon 2024. I think it was Capturing Disabled Voices was the name of the talk. Um, I was really proud of it, but it changed direction very soon afterwards. So it's been odd when I get to discuss it with people because people do bring it up to me, and it's always so lovely when people have watched that talk, and then I have to kind of say, actually, that has now disbanded, something that I was shouting from the rooftops about and really encouraging. So really, this all kind of comes down to one of those phrases that we have in the accessibility industry that is doing your job well is making yourself redundant. Ultimately, the idea that if you're doing things right, accessibility should become totally integrated in your business processes. It's, accessibility by design. You shouldn't need an accessibility expert in the room to make sure that disabled people's needs are considered and provided for. Um, so what happened is that we moved that research panel from being like a side entity, uh, a specialist, almost extracurricular, into their day-to-day processes, so that all the researchers could feel comfortable and confident enough to make sure that those voices are represented in the big pieces of research that we do, especially on stuff that is higher impact, like the way the contact us area and the help area, all of that. Like we really need those voices, especially then, to make sure that we're supporting people right.
Yeah,
So since it's just moved to be part of the general wider business user research processes, and still very much working with them, we do regular accessibility reviews of like the consent forms, the communications that go out to participants, the platforms that are used for signing a consent form, for doing the research itself, like the video calls, but also things like the compensation or the um, almost incentives or rewards that you give of people's time. That is in the form of high street vouchers or supermarket vouchers, and that platform needs to be accessible. Otherwise, you're rewarding people who it's unfair. You're able to give some compensation to some people, but not others. So
yeah,
yeah, but we're still very much working together. So there is not a panel as such anymore. But it is not a bad thing because those voices are very much still being heard, but with less active coordination on my part. And I still get to have really helpful conversations and client cases through that inbox that was used to help build the panel. But yeah, this happens in accessibility. You've got to sometimes let let things fly free from being your
yeah,
baby and things you set up, to just being the norm. Like that is the goal at the end of the day. That's what you want for all of this and any accessibility project or initiative. But it just happened so soon after that talk that it was like, oh, okay, I guess that's out of date now.
Oh no, sort of pulled from under your feet a little bit. That's got to feel a little bit disconcerting, but at the same time, obviously, like you say, it's a huge positive, I think, because there's so many times where I have these conversations where I'm just like, but it should just be done anyway. And then it's like, I don't mean that to sort of belittle or undermine the hard work that needs to be done in the area, in the space of accessibility, but it's frustrating, I think, when things aren't accessible, because if they were done right the first time round, then yeah, no one would have jobs in this field, but
Yeah.
it would actually be for the greater good. But yeah, I mean, what a great achievement again that is sort of part of in-house processes, and it's sort of being done. I'm sure that, like you say, time to time you're stepping in and just being like, just double checking you're still following processes and how things should be done.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Good stuff. And then, so next was about the sort of the strength in the accessibility community, which kind of speaks to that last point and the panel of the research processes and things. Um, it's a really, really powerful aspect within this space. I feel so ingrained within it, as much as I'm someone that's a recruiter and helping people find jobs within the space. I'm super passionate about accessibility, and I think everyone within the community is as well. And how has for you how has connecting with other accessibility leaders and specialists influenced the work that you do at HL and the sort of direction of the program that you've helped to implement? I guess on top of that as well is if there's any key sort of resources or groups that
Mm,
you'd like to share with the
yeah,
listeners,
sure.
and then we can link them as well.
Of course. So with that one, yeah, it felt like everything changed when I met a group of accessibility leads. Like it was game changing. I it felt like the before days and the after days once I was active in this community. The lessons that I've learned through a lot of people that have already been on this podcast and different champions groups and roundtables that we've hosted or attended. Those lessons take years of internal work to gain otherwise, like understanding what the relationship with a third party is like beyond a sales rep. You don't know that unless you've onboarded and completed work with them. You can ask very specific questions. You can even ask negotiation tips or kind of compare coverage or contracts or anything like that to be like, oh yeah, I found this. I wish I'd invested more in this area, or this was a problem I ran into down the line that I could have known about sooner. That understanding just absolutely game changing. And like you said, everyone in this area is so passionate. They understand like the burnout, the fight that you have to push forward every day, the nuances of like such a complex discipline that is very much tied to disability rights and equality. And on a personal level, like it's been so nice to meet other disabled professionals at conferences, seeing other people with walking aids or service dogs and accommodations in place. It means a lot to me. It really does. And ultimately, we're all trying to do something pretty revolutionary, especially if you start the journey yourself, like I was lucky enough to. So trying to influence sometimes a global business, a massive business. We're UK based, but I know people who are working for companies that have presence all over the globe. And we're just convincing them to try and do the right thing. And it's not that they don't want to, it's almost that they don't know about it in the same way. It is pretty revolutionary when you look at the impact it can have as well. So the community completely leveled up my confidence in my instincts, the value I could see in my own work. It's one of the best things that's ever happened in my career. And it's so nice to get to share the pieces of work that I've poured all myself into as well. It really feels like both ways, like getting to share our 2 year accessibility strategy, all the initiatives, all that experience. Like it's so amazing what you can gain from the community, but it also feels so nice to put back into it.
Hmm.
as well. But definitely like a really good place to start is the Champions of Accessibility Network on LinkedIn. That is a fantastic group of people. They have monthly video calls with different speakers. I've presented in that, and it's such a lovely supportive community. But
Mm.
there's like a Slack channel as well that's really good for technical questions. And all of us are so happy to introduce you to different people. Um, I've met, yeah, so many people through like, oh, do you know about this person yet? Have you met them? Let's do an intro. Like that community. It's just, yeah, I can't believe I ever did it myself without them. Um, and yeah, especially when it's I'm very lucky to have a team, and a lot of people are just one person, and they
Yeah,
might not even be on accessibility 100% of the time. So just to have a space to talk to people, it can be really lonely before
it
you
can.
get deeply involved. You're trusting your instincts, you're trying to do all you can, but yeah, finding that group of people who are doing the same thing, the same fight, just absolutely game changing.
Yeah. Oh, incredible. And yeah, I mean, so I'm part of the Ali Slack and the Can group as well, and been very privileged to put my 2 cents in on one of those calls in the past,
Mm,
which it was just great. And then I huge imposter, and I think loads of people in the space. I think it's a part of there are so many people, like you say, that are one man bands or one person bands
mhm.
that are doing it all on their own. And then where do you get that feedback from other than, oh, shall I ask ChatGPT? Is this correct? Don't do that. Or, so if you've got that community where you can go to other people that have done this, or, and I guess it's a free resource as well. Whereas I obviously there are amazing consultancies out there that specialize in this, and if they're paid and they're brought in house, they will have experience from a multitude of different clients. You'd hope where they've done that sort of stuff before, and then you
It's
can learn
true.
from that experience as well. But I think alternatively, and the not the way that you can gain that information without the expensive resource or without having to get more buy-in and more budget from an executive sponsor is yeah, just reach out. I mean, everybody's so friendly, and it is like you say, game changing because
Yeah.
I've worked in tech recruitment for 8 years and I've been doing accessibility as part of that for the whole time. But when I wasn't focusing purely in this space, it was so hard to find proper groups of people that would share because it is very everyone's trying to get ahead of one another. Tech changes so often, which is another reason why we need
Mm.
accessibility specialists to be on their game as well, because everything's changing. But yeah, it's one of those. It's just a fantastic community, so I couldn't agree more. Sorry to just double down on everything you've just said, but yeah,
All good.
awesome. Um, so then it's a really sort of shift as well with this next question, and it's balancing sort of personal experience or lived experience, as some people may refer to it, with the sort of professional advocacy.
Hmm.
I think a lot of imposter syndrome on my side is because I don't identify as someone that is living with a condition or a disability. So I find it quite hard to speak on behalf of others as much as I try to advocate for accessibility and the reason why it's so important. But as someone with lived experience of various disabilities, as you mentioned, or conditions,
Hmm.
how do you navigate the balance between bringing your own personal insights into your work, but maintaining that sort of objective and professional approach
Yeah,
um, within a financial services company of all places as well?
totally. Yeah, I've been on a real journey with it, with how much I put in of myself. Um, so like initially that lived experience played a real big part in my impact, I think. That visibility, that education, just being in the office, having a very different chair to other people, having a very different keyboard and desk setup or monitors that are tinted purple. Just visibility, like my glasses. I have purple tinted glasses for Erlin syndrome. So I found that visibility can make a really big difference. And your early advocates or allies are often people who are either disabled themselves or have a very close by loved one, or child or sibling or friend or family member. Um, Often to get that first buy-in, that visibility of disability is really important and powerful. And there are so many people in this community that don't identify with having access needs or disabilities. So I would say maybe like a third of us maybe have lived experience. So don't worry too much. You're doing good. We need able-bodied or neurotypical people to help with this. It wouldn't be a big enough influence if it was just us. So props to you. Please don't
No.
internalize your concern on that too much.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I used to lean on my experience a lot, like in a personal note though, asserting those needs and rights and directly linking it to your role is a lot of significant emotional labor. And it can also feel like if you face challenges, if you face pushback or blockers, when you've tied it up with your identity, that can feel personal. And it's
Mm.
not, but when you're putting all you have in, and part of that is being visible and being in the room and speaking up when your initiatives don't get prioritized or you're not engaged with on certain things, it can feel more personal than it might for other jobs, I would say.
Mm.
And that can all add up.
Oh,
So,
God, yeah.
and it's very easy to naturally fall into focusing on colleague accessibility, which, you know, making sure that other people are having reasonable adjustments put in place, advising on um, what assistive technology might be helpful, and advocating that they get official training rather than it coming to you for tips. Once it's colleague, it gets really personal. Um, and I, at some point, I had to draw a line and kind of say, all right, I need to lock in on client accessibility as much as possible and support product teams in rather than being super close to disabled employees at HL. I consult here and there, absolutely, and I also do cross-platform, like you mentioned earlier, with like letters. But it's hard not to get super sucked into diversity networks and all of that. Like I set one up, but I had to hand it over because it's just
Yeah.
not sustainable. And
No.
I learned to, lean into those real client stories. That's a way to take you out of it a bit and make it about your products and your client base. But it's a careful balance for sure. Um, and I can still lean into my background and my community when close colleagues come to me for like personal advice, whether that's parents exploring a diagnosis of something for their child, or even what do you do to manage chronic eye strain? What can I access? What are my options? What can I learn from you?
Yeah.
But you really can't do it all, especially when you work part-time. And I had to kind of learn to protect my peace.
Yeah.
Um, but it's also amazing to get a chance to represent the community and teach people this nuance and these. Or we were talking a little earlier about etiquette and language and nuance and just the reality of what language can mean. But at the same time, making people feel not too scared to speak at all. It's okay
Yeah.
to ask um, how you identify. If we were talking earlier about identity first or person first language, so whether you would say person with a disability or a disabled person, and
Mm.
what groups especially tend to have a really strong opinion on that, or as a user researcher, how you start, how you ask, or if you mirror the language someone's giving you, and that kind of thing. So
Yeah.
it's it's been it's been really valuable, but at some point you really have to kind of lean on those connections that you've been building with through a research panel or an inbox because it's not sustainable.
Mm. Oh, yeah,
It's
exactly.
not sustainable.
I mean, you
um,
almost run the risk of becoming Dr. Zoe Portlock as well. Like you say, if people were asking for how do I get a diagnosis on this, or almost risking asking you to diagnose them, if you're associated with that, that space, then it's like, well, I don't. It's a lot of pressure on
Yeah.
you, because not only do you have a job to do, you're obviously very empathetic towards people. If you see someone struggling, you're like, I want to help them, and what can I do? But then you've got, again, I think you worded it perfectly, protecting your peace. I think it's a really wise thing to have to
Yeah.
try and do.
Yeah, and I say this as well, generally, that I can't separate myself from my disabilities, and I wouldn't want to.
Yeah.
I wouldn't want to. But then I still need to speak about it enough to arrange reasonable adjustments and all of those kinds of things. So it's such a balance. But I think, yeah, the risk of burnout is much higher when you're involved in every part of accessibility in an organization.
Yeah.
But I do love getting to represent uh, the reality of things sometimes, like breaking down actually how many people who I would say registered as visually impaired, that's a whole other thing. But how many people actually read Braille or use Braille? And the numbers are so much smaller than people might think, because then you're like, well, when and how would someone learn Braille? Well, they might learn it at school. It's like, well, they might have had to go to a specialist school, which means they may have had those challenges earlier in their life. They may have been born blind or born visually impaired. And
Yeah.
if you acquire that in your adult life, where do you go to learn Braille? Who helps you learn Braille?
Mm.
And how that interacts with disability, with technology, with mobile screen readers becoming so helpful and strong and present and looked after, that the use of those is easier to learn than a physical language as such.
Yeah.
So all of those nuances, we just kind of assume sometimes that people know these things that are the top level understanding of a disability.
Yeah.
But actually, there's so much more to that. Um,
Yeah. I
and
think,
how,
and sorry.
and with BSL as well, um, the the amount of people who are day-to-day users of that, and the amount of people who have learned it for the early stages of their child's development to use it as to communicate, but when and if that child becomes verbal and develops that way of communication, it drops off that usage. And what that does to statistics of who is learning BSL, how common is it to use in complex conversations and not just about basic needs that you may use to help communicate with a child early on. Like all of these bits, all of that nuance, I love getting to dive into it and talk about it. It's
Yeah.
fascinating stuff.
It is, absolutely. And when you mentioned about Braille and bringing it, into the digital accessibility side of things, when I was fortunate enough to be at Mimuna Madawi has got a fantastic workshop that she's doing at Stepstone Group, and there was a discussion about questioning the group, how much do you think a braille display, a refreshing braille display
Mm.
costs? And, the
Yes.
cost of accessibility to the user is
Mm-hmm.
phenomenal. Thousands of pounds for a refreshing braille display you
Yeah.
can spend. And even to create braille books, it's such a almost ancient, it's not ancient, but a very old school technology.
Mm-hmm.
And the cost to print braille is insane. It's just,
Mm-hmm.
why is it? I mean, I know that obviously there's scarcity in the market. Maybe it's not as high demand, so there's not been that innovation. But every industry is innovating. So why aren't we focusing, and why isn't there more innovation in that sort of
Yeah.
space in terms of
Oh,
those? Yeah.
I have a hot take on that.
Oh, yay.
With the cost of everything, people generally don't understand how expensive wheelchairs are, even the most basic example, and where that funding comes from, because it is a postcode lottery whether you get a grant towards the cost or not. and you have to choose between um, a some schemes you have to choose between having help towards an electric wheelchair or towards a car. And that's one of the best schemes out there.
Yeah.
The cost of things. So I have a bit of a theory, which is that Jaws, the screen reader, is very expensive, and there is a free version ish, an alternative MPDA. I think that some technology is priced up because they rely on employers to cover that cost when they put that in place.
Mm.
So they don't almost, the price of stuff isn't necessarily expected to be the individual paying that.
Right.
It could be access to work, it could be disabled students allowance, um, it could be the employer covering it. Like, I think there's something there with that. I
Yeah.
hope they're not expecting people to drop thousands a year on an updated license. And that's with the rise of the internet and smartphones. It's amazing that that kind of technology now isn't only accessible through those expensive routes. It's built in and it's good quality. So it is interesting to see that shift over time. But yes, the cost of stuff, people just, unless you have that insight, they just don't know. But it's thousands and thousands to get
Yeah.
the things you need to do to be able to leave the house half the time. Just like how I was on the waiting list to have help towards an accessible bathroom adjustment for 5 years. Like,
Jeez. Yeah.
what do you do in that time? And the nuance of dealing with care agencies, even, or how people assume that you don't have a job, or don't work, or if you are working, that you're actually volunteering. Like, there's
Yeah.
so much there, and I love to be able to to explain that to people and kind of give them a little insight into it. Um, because I wish those kind of things were more common.
Mm.
There's a lot in the news right now around benefits, and I won't get into it, but if people knew the reality of what it's even like right now, half of the stuff that is being said would not be said.
Yeah.
So,
And it's um another sort of point on sympathy versus empathy as well. I think a lot of
mm,
I read a lot in that sort of language when it comes from the government and
mm,
schemes and things around benefits where they're sympathetic, but they're not in any way, shape, or form empathetic. They're not putting themselves in the shoes of others, and even trying to understand the struggles. They're just, oh, I feel for you, but you know, our
mm.
deficit that we've created is more important. But anyway, sorry, we'll try not to get too
I'm
political.
trying not to get too political. When this was recorded, things were going down. Um, but I will rein it in as I do at work and
I
such.
think a lot of people will probably be able to pick out when this is recorded, but
Yeah.
yeah, not a good time. But
Mm-mm.
we will see, we will see,
Mm.
and that's why I think another. You've probably actually given me the title for the episode where you said
Ooh.
accessibility is like a revolution, and I do think that that's the case, and they're risking it for a full frontal assault of accessibility professionals. Let's rise up. Um,
A revolution that should have never needed to happen in the first place. And
yeah,
that's part of the problem. um, but, you know, it's good. But it does sometimes feel revolutionary, and that's exciting to get to be part of that, but also frustrating that it's even needed.
yeah,
So it's a lot. There's a lot going on when you work in this area.
yeah.
But it's also absolutely brilliant, and I can't imagine doing anything else with my life.
And super rewarding as much as at times it might feel that you're not getting anywhere with things
Hmm.
or things are falling on they're just not happening and you're pushing and pushing. But I think there are always going to be, I mean, what you've spoken about over the 6 years with HL as well. And it's nice probably to reflect and think, oh, yeah, do you know what? I've actually achieved so much. Um, but brilliant. And I guess that brings me to our final question, which is advice for organizations who are just starting out. Who shouldn't be, but they are just starting out on their accessibility journey. Um, and if there's any advice you'd give for like step one? What's the smallest thing they can do to really sort of build internal capability and engaging with the community?
Love that. Um, I think, especially if it's from scratch, your advocate, your lead in this, you need to have a real good foundational knowledge in order to be able to teach the people around you, in order to know when training is good quality, if you're investing in it, you need to have a foundation of knowledge. And being 2025, there is so much out there already. But that foundation of knowledge will propel you forward. It can help you hire the right people. It can it can help you know when to lean into different aspects of the business case for different people. And that foundation, it can be built in a whole range of ways, and it does not need to be formal training. It doesn't. There's years and years of DeQ's AxCon conference recordings available right now, including my own, not to plug. But yeah, there's years of really niche talks that are beyond just this is why this is important and this is what alt text is. It is niche industry stuff. The different tracks being success with um, accessibility in an organization. Honestly, AxCon, when I first discovered that, mind was blown and I learned so much. And it can also help empower your teams and different disciplines as well, because there will be stuff there for them. It's not all expert level stuff. There is some beginner, but it's really in depth, and it's brilliant. It's a brilliant resource. But also joining things like the Champions of Accessibility Network on LinkedIn can, reaching out, making use of that community online. So posting in that group, joining that Slack channel, all of those kinds of things. And like I said, I do come from a super privileged position in this industry. I work for a financial services company who back me in what I'm trying to do. I have had budget to work with third parties. I was even able to build a team. Carl Goldstraw, shout out, my fellow accessibility expert at HR.
Love that man.
Yeah, legend. We tackled it all together. But, I've been so lucky to be doing this job 100% of my time, and to be able to hire someone in to do it with me. Um, but there's so much out there because, like I said, I'm in financial services, but loads of people come at this from charities or local organizations, or public services, and you're not alone in that. You can find other people working for similar places and see what worked for them, how they've kind of made the most of the resources that they have or don't have. Um,
Yeah.
Budget will be. It's. I'm so privileged to speak of it like this. But yeah, there's a lot of people out there doing it with very different levels of buy-in, different levels of resource, different levels of influence, and together you can really learn so much. So, put aside a Friday afternoon every week and just dive in and soak it all up, whilst establishing those feedback channels so that you can build those stories, because bringing that excitement and knowledge alongside a real client, a real person telling you, maybe on a video call or a call recording, about how you're letting them down and not letting them have agency and autonomy. The combination of those two things can actually get you places. Um, so yeah, I'm so grateful for the community. It literally changed everything. And I could not be recommending diving in enough. I love this topic. I love this industry and community. Um, oh.
And there's, like you say, there is so much. I guess that I would jump in there then to say, yeah, if you're going to dive into the AxCon free resources, the on-demand stuff, start with Zoe's talk, which
Oh.
was capturing disabled voices, which there's a lot of talk about shifting left. There's a lot of talk about starting everything earlier in the design and development process. But I think that the research is actually probably where it should all start, because before you actually even put pen to paper or start creating wireframes or any kind of design, what are you actually designing for? Who are
Yeah.
you designing for? What needs to be considered? So the only way you're going to find that out is by capturing disabled voices and starting that research early on. So yeah, I know it's tricky because it can be a bit of a minefield. I felt very overwhelmed with a lot of the information. It's amazing that there's so much on there.
Mm.
But when you're registered to DQ's AxCon and you look through, I'm like, where do I start? Where do I begin? Is this relevant?
Mm-hmm.
I'm just trying to sort of pick the bits out. But I guess if you've got a specific problem, then you can probably search within there and
Yeah.
find something that's relevant to yours as well.
Also, Scope are fantastic. When we're talking about identity and nuance, the way that they advocate and communicate, um, I will always start there. So Scope for Business, especially, uh, is a really good angle in terms of making influence on accessibility. I would so recommend Scope and also recommend the social model and the medical model of disability and being aware where those influence, and promoting that it's not necessarily the medical diagnosis that disabled people, it is the systems around us. Um,
Absolutely.
so yeah.
100% amazing. Well, I'm going to make sure that there's going to be links to all of those resources as part of the info on this episode. So brilliant. And then if you've got any final thoughts, Zoe, if you'd want to share anything, if there's any, I don't know, events or upcoming initiatives,
Ooh.
or even if you just want to have a little rant, you can get political for a little bit. That's fine.
Okay, well, I suppose I'd start with the next kind of step for me is we're getting the opportunity to rebuild and restart um, our app and website, and I'm so excited to be in there and not a blocker and not talk about technical debt or not cause too much trouble, but just do it at a gold standard from the beginning. So I'm really energized by that at the moment, and I know there's privilege to that as well. I'm so fortunate to be involved with the right things at the right time. But if I am to say anything else, I suppose if you're listening still, feel free to add me on LinkedIn. If you are in the southwest of England or Bristol, let me know. We like to organise regular face-to-face meetups, and I can leap you into those things. But otherwise, thank you for listening to me vent and rant and fangirl about this industry for however long this podcast has been.
I couldn't have said it better myself. Thank you, Zoe. Yeah, just to really appreciate everything you're doing, everything you've done, and the time you've given to me as well. Really, really appreciate you being on the podcast. And it's been so lovely getting to know you and your colleague Carl,
Mm-hmm.
sort of in the last few months, really. I've known of you, and I've fangirled myself from a distance, but now I'm. No, it's really nice to actually get to talk to you, and I feel extremely privileged. Um, that I get to. So thank you
Thank
for
you.
sharing everything
Of
and being
course.
so candid and open. And yeah, I'll see
Okay,
everyone on the next one.
great. Thank you.